Our first pillar of Islam is making a declaration of faith, which consists of stating, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his final messenger. This verbal utterance makes anyone a Muslim, but there is a deeper level considered, as mentioned in this verse right here. Belief being pinned to the Arabic word tu'minu, which is contrasted with a profession of faith, aslamna, which is also the root word for a mu'min, which is someone who has completely submitted to the will of God, but they're not a mu'min, someone who has deeply entrenched the values of Islam into their day-to-day lives.
Now this ayah is to remind us there is a difference between a Muslim and a mu'min. A mu'min is a person who have no more doubts in Allah. Whatever Allah wants you to do, you just have to do it. No question asked. That is a mu'min. But our iman also will be tested. It will increase and it will decrease. It increases with more righteous deeds, and it will decrease when you start to commit sins.
At a practical level, we know this differentiation is important as extrinsic religiosity, or the use of religion for primarily external purposes, such as social status, prestige, or finances, is linked with negative mental health and also negative social health. And I've talked about that using righteous gemstones as an example on the carnage that many of these organized religion institutions do in our society when they're only operating at an extrinsic level. Whereas intrinsic religiosity, or an internalization of the values, ideals, and principles of one's faith, is robustly linked with well-being, although most believers have both extrinsic and intrinsic components. As I stated before in the first lecture, I gave this presentation to a room full of psychologists. So for clinicians, if a person does consider themselves religious, we would want to understand how that looks like in their day-to-day life. What rituals and practices do they engage in? Do they attend a place of worship? Have they ever had a spiritual experience? What are some unique ways they may practice their faith, considering their family or culture? This may better help paint a broader picture as to the protective and coping aspects or risk factors of one's religious spiritual identity. And lastly, it's found that most Muslims and believers of other faiths visit their congregation, their ummah, or their imam as the primary place for emotional or psychological support, which is why collaboration with many spiritual places of worship is vital. And you can read more about that on my website. It's one of the focal points of my career. And prayer is the methodology by which Muslims achieve a sense of peace, i.e. only in the remembrance of Allah does one find peace, as it provides psycho-spiritual fuel and energy to grapple with all of life's turmoils and obstacles. It is a normal part of clinical practice to engage in mindful practices, such as deep breathing or body scans. As a clinician, as a health professional, you may want to ask a religious person to use that time to recite a prayer internally, or to speak to God, to express gratitude, or just to express what you're going through, or even at a heightened level to ask for intercession for someone else, right? What we call Shafi, right? Asking for someone else who may be suffering for God to alleviate their burden. And I'll also allude to a poster presentation I did at the APA conference in 2018, in which I talked about utilizing behavioral therapy to increase prayer, and I have that manuscript available for free on my website. And beyond increases at a biological level, right? Dhikr, the practice of remembering God, for us as believers, this is an innately spiritual practice, right? We're not doing these things because it enhances our dopamine level. That comes secondary, right? As Aristotle said, turning to base pleasures makes us a slave of our desires. We do this because, first and foremost, it's what God commands of us, right? And so it's a spiritual ritual, first and foremost. And we have many different aspects of ritual. I'm showing Salat right here. In the Shia sect, the Shia madhab, we also have Majlis, Noha, Matam, Jalus, reciting Marcia, we have many different aspects of submitting to God, utilizing these different practices, right? And we also see that in many other schools, many other belief systems, right? We have the totem, for example, in the Native American tradition, something that's found in many other indigenous places as well.
Since time began, humans have believed that they're related to the living world around them, that the earth is alive and powerful. They've known that everything is made of the same stuff: earth and air, fire and water, sacred elements crucial to life. That world imagined by human beings is held together by love, given form by spirit.
Zakat, or almsgiving, is a very critical component of Islamic well-being because it moves it away from an individualistic level, promoting sacrifice and selflessness at a communal level. Zakat is compulsory for all Muslims in that you give 2.5% of all your earnings and savings at the end of the fiscal year. And this is quoted in the Quran, in which it says, "Whoever helps ease difficulty in the world, Allah will grant him ease and difficulty in this world and the hereafter." And we also know that from much of the current social science literature, in that altruism and helping is consistently linked with higher reports of well-being. And we can watch a little bit of this video right here to help illustrate that
It all starts with just one person, you. The thing about kindness is that it's just about the only thing in the world that doubles when you share it. Studies have shown that if you perform just one random act of kindness a day, you'll not only reduce your stress, anxiety, and depression, but your body is flooded with the same hormones that make you and the person you've helped calmer, healthier, and happier.
Fasting, Som, is a component of self-control, but it's a much larger ritual that's supposed to activate a behavioral component in instantiating self-control, willpower into one's life. Fasting is a very commonly reported diet trend in Western societies. It has many physical advantages. And I'm linking my series on my thesis, which was on Ramadan, because we found that there were substantial fatigue scores, headache scores, stomach aches. This means for the Muslim person, despite going through aches and pains, you persevere and still go through this cycle of fasting for a larger goal in mind, to achieve taqwa, God consciousness. And we can see this interview from Kyrie Irving, which really helps depict that aspect of self-control and self-sacrifice.
Kyrie, on a personal note, you have said that you are fasting for Ramadan, which, for those who are unaware, means no food, no water from sun up to sundown. How do you muster the energy to go out and score 34 points with very little nutrition in your body?
Well, it's a journey with God, and I'm not alone in this. I have brothers and sisters all around the world that are fasting with me. We hold our prayers and our meditations very sacred, and when you come out here, I mean, God's inside me, God's inside you, God's inside all of us, so I'm walking with faith.
And making a pilgrimage to Hajj in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, is obligatory for all Muslims who are able, they have the financial means to do so. We found reports in our book chapter that adherents report anxiety, stress, financial logistic issues, and even fear of safety due to previous incidents of stampedes, and I'm linking some of those articles right here. But during the actual rituals, we see reports of awe, oneness, peace, connections to their faith and community, and even follow-up reports similar to mystical or near-death experiences, substantial behavioral, emotional, and social changes. And in the book, this book that I just read called Big Gods, it shows that prior to doing Hajj, you have Muslims who endorse a much higher level of in-group bias, and post-Hajj, they show equitable levels in that fair treatment of non-Muslims is as important to them as fair treatment of Muslims is, right? Which really shows the sacredness, the transcendent ritual of Hajj as exemplified beautifully in this clip from Spike Lee's Malcolm X.
The American Negro can never be blamed for his racial animosities. He's only reacting to 400 years of oppression and discrimination. But as racism leads America up the suicidal path, I do believe that the younger generation will see the handwriting on the wall, and many of them will want to turn to the spiritual path of the truth. The only way left in this world to ward off the disaster that racism must surely lead to.
And in the book chapter also, I wrote a pertinent section on Karbala and the rituals of Ziyarat and Ashura and visiting different shrines for Shias. This is something that you'll also find with many Sufi tariqas on visiting different shrines as well. Closing up, what are some takeaways for us as clinicians, researchers, or interested parties? Firstly, as we see, there is a multi-tiered and dynamic package which constitutes deen. Most research only uses a single item index to measure religiosity at a single time point. Practically, we want to better understand what specific facets are aiding in well-being or decreasing symptomology, and vice versa. For example, using some of those personality psychology components that I alluded to in that model, measuring different facets of well-being, such as personality psychology, introversion, neuroticism, openness to experience, individual level and family level, especially for youth and adolescents, which is where I primarily work with, and social level, in that highly religious people tend to report higher levels of well-being in highly religious countries, and vice versa as well.